In this episode, I talk about the most satanic action figures ever made. That's right, LJN's Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so stick around.
In the eerie world of deep, dark dungeons, mystery and magic seem real. There's good against evil with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons action figures. Warduke, Killick, Strongheart, and Bronze Dragon, each sold separately.
Beware, Strongheart. We will cast an evil spell and steal the treasure.
Well, evil is no match for good. The treasure is safe.
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons action figures, Killick, Warduke, Bronze Dragon, Strongheart, each sold separately from LJN.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Days of Dorker Past. My name's Rob, and in this episode, we're going to talk about the infamous LJN Advanced Dungeons and Dragons action figures. Now, I'm going to give 10 of my favorite ones, but this is just my opinion, so I could be wrong, I could be right. These are just the ones that I dig. Now, there were only 19 action figures created in the line, which only lasted about 2 years. And with picking 10, that's more than half of what the line offered, unfortunately. It should have went on more, it should have had some more great figures, and it should have tied into the D&D cartoon a little bit more. Unfortunately, it didn't at all. Both were released in 1983, the figures and the cartoon, but they never seemed to gel together. I'm assuming it had something to do with rights, maybe, or just that they never got the opportunity because of how quick the toy line came and went. Also in the line, there were 7 different creatures and mounts, and 1 playset. There were many things that unfortunately were abandoned, and something on the cool side was they released kind of to the side a line of bendy, wind-up, and PVC figures. That there were 45 of those, but we'll talk about those another day. Today is just about the action figures. Now, in no particular order, here's number 1, and that's Killick. Killick is an evil sorcerer, and what makes him cool, in my opinion, is he came with a black cloth cloak with cool high collar. And if you know anything about me, I'm such a mark for cloth accessories and items that go onto a character. Now, also what was really neat was he came with these cool green Dayglow large staff that kind of had a dragon coiled up the top with like a demon head. Pretty neat imagery. He also came with a small wand that also had kind of a dragon motif to it. He was perfect in his simplicity. He was pretty much your generic evil sorcerer type, but that worked. It could fit in with any type of play that you wanted to do. He could be chilling, working with Cobra. He could be just an evil little dude hanging out with Skeletor. I mean, he was perfect in his genericness. And that's what makes him great and makes him number 1 on my list. Now, number 2 on my list is the Good Crusader Bowmark. He had this awesome white armor with a lion motif to it. He came with a huge shield, a blue cape, an axe, and a sword. Now, one of the things, and I guess this came with him being Series 2, was that his helmet didn't come off. Some of the other characters that made it on the list had that feature, but he did not. But one of the neat things was his helmet had these cool tines that came off the top that could have kind of been samurai-esque. But again, he's a kind of simple character that looks like how a paladin should. Gleaming white, full of virtue, and ready to chop down evil. Now, one of the greatest things about the D&D line was the fact that the characters were scaled in different sizes. Unlike other toy lines at the time, it did not have a set size. Not like G.I. Joe with its 3 3/4 or He-Man with its, 4.5, 5-inch figure. No, these ranged in all different sizes. And number 3 on the list is awesome because of its minuscule size. And that leads to number 3 on the list, Zarek. And like I said, different scale of sizes, he was very short. He was a half-orc assassin, and he came with this wicked little yellow dagger, but that's all he came with, but he had so much personality. His green skin, the look on his face, and his cool armor and outfit. He was just a neat little dude that I wish I had today. If I remember correctly, back in the day, he was kind of like a peg warmer. Nobody wanted him. And that's a shame because, like I said, the character just oozed personality. And it looked like he just oozed. He was pretty gross looking. Now, number 4 on the list is another one that came out with the second series. And the second series was very rare. It hardly made it to the shelves. And I think it was a low production because they were kind of burning out at that time. Hawkler was a stocky looking good ranger. He came with a hawk, you kind of have to with a name like Hawkler, a bow that's always drawn with its arrow nocked, a quiver, and a dagger. He was just a neat figure, and like I said, I'm always a mark for accessories that go on, and the hawk could actually clip onto his hand, a la like Spirit from G.I. Joe. But being so rare as part of the second series, I never saw him on the shelves. And I'm only saying he's cool because I wish I had him, and he looks cool in the pictures. So, number 5 on the list is also one that breaks the scale barrier of the toys. He was very big, and his name is Northlord, and he was a great barbarian. Now, little backstory here. Growing up, my parents had these really close friends. They had the complete D&D toy line, well, at least the first series, and they had them displayed on their shelves. Little did I know back then, that I know now, that they were gamers. And these figures, probably to them, were so mind-blowing because they were playing first edition D&D at the time. Now, Northlord, when I remember seeing him on their shelf, I was always drawn to him. It may have been the baby blue color scheme, the awesome helmet that unfortunately was too big, but this big winged helmet, and his shield, and his sword. But the cool thing about his sword was he came with a scabbard that it went in. So yet again, I mark out for that. And he came with this awesome battle axe. So chock full of weapons, awesome helmet, great barbarian from the north. This sounds like a character I would play. Now, number 6 is the evil ogre leader, Ogre King. Fitting name. Now, this sickly green, huge figure, in the same scale as Northlord, was just plain awesome. And like Northlord, he had a helmet that went on, his sword went into a scabbard, and he had an awesome shield. And kind of like Northlord with his baby blue motif, Ogre King had a seafoam green teal kind of color scheme that as a kid just drew my eye. And yet again, it was one of the toys on their shelf that I always wanted to play with, and they weren't offering up those for me to play with. And I can understand that. Big gamer geeks that I now know that they were, I wouldn't let me play with them either. I'd probably end up losing the stuff or breaking something. But like most of the figures in the line, or if not all of them, he had the cool trigger on the back that made him chop. And with his huge, gnarly looking sword, it just was awesome. Number 7 on the list is the awesome and small Elkhorn. This dwarven fighter was perfect. Unfortunately, his accessories didn't come off, so he had this awesome horned helmet on at all times. He came with this awesome buckler and sword. Perfect. Great figure. Wish I still had him. I mean, he would be striking on your shelf. A, because of the size and how posable he was, and just he's an awesome looking dude. I am a big player and fan of dwarves, so this figure speaks to me so much. I gotta find one day. Now, number 8 on the list is part of Series 2 and super rare to find, and that is the Evil Knight Grimsword. Grimsword comes at a time when the figures were made a little bit more cheaply, but they didn't cheap out when it came to his ornamentation. He had an awesome snake design going up his armor. His shield had a snake face on it, and his weapons, he came with a very awesome scimitar and this awesome mace that looked like a snake's open maw with the chain coming out with the, or would, I guess it would be a morning star with the large spiked ball at the end. He had this cool little loop where you could put the mace that it could hang so he could hold his shield and his awesome scimitar. But great figure. It would have been better with a little bit more accessories, a removable helmet that could have been a skull underneath or something. But he was just plain awesome. I think he probably launched the design of Death Knights to come. Now, number 9 on the list is probably the most famous, most popular of any of the AD&D characters, and that's Warduke. Released in the first series, Warduke, not much, you can't say much about this dude. He was perfect. Down to his helmet, to his armor, to his sword and shield. His shield was awesome because it had this awesome monster face on it, and yet again, he's just awesome. Just awesome, awesome. Now, Warduke was actually one of the characters I did have, and I loved him. He had the cool attack feature with the trigger on the back, and I had him messing up Joe's, Star Wars figures, anybody that got in his way. Now, unfortunately, I don't know if it was due to poor craftsmanship by LJN or just the poor management of a kid, but he lost his head, and I believe I did get a second one, and I have no idea whatever happened to that one. I probably did some stupid lame brain stuff in middle school, which ended up being the demise of a lot of my cool toys that I wish I could go back in time and take myself and shake it and say, "Stop it! Stop it!" Now, number 10 on the list ends up at number 10 because it has some very rich history that we'll get into, but that is Melf. He also went by the name of Parlay in later releases, I believe, but his original name was Melf, and he was a mage fighter, so very cool. He was a dual class. He was very small. He was an elf, and it was the first edition elves, which I think they've gotten back into, but very small, very childlike, and he came with a green glittery cape, which I dig, and cool green neon dagger and quiver and bow. Very cool figure. I remember just the articulation of him was awesome. I believe he was yet another peg warmer because I guess kids either could get a really, butch G.I. Joe or this little elf dude. I wish I could go back in time. I would get the elf dude and the G.I. Joe. But very cool. And like I said, he has a very rich backstory that kind of fills in a couple other characters. So let me grab this because I don't want to mess anything up. Okay, I got my handy dandy tablet here. Now let's look up this awesome character. This actually goes into some of the origins of D&D and Gary Gygax and his family. So let me start here. Now, Melf, also known as Prince Brightflame, is a Grey Elven Archmage in the Greyhawk campaign setting, which was the first world that Gary Gygax created when he made D&D. It was originally a player character for his son in their home campaign. Now, Melf is a native of the Elven Kingdom of Selene and is recognized by many as the leader of the Knights of Luna. In Gygax's 86 novel Artifact of Evil, Melf is also known as Melf of the Arrow. Now, 86, of course, that came out after the toy line, so maybe he had some inspiration with the bow and arrow that the toy came with. Now, it's acknowledged that Melf is not his real name, but he says it is simply a name as good as any. Like I said, he was created and played by his son, Luke. And Gygax recalled an incident during those early days of role playing in the campaign. In punishment for crimes against nature, Melf was commanded to rise before dawn each morning for a year and frolic merrily at dawn singing. And the song that he sang, and I guess this is very Tolkien inspired with the songs, but I will not sing this, mind you. When the sun in the morning peeps over the hill and caresses the rosebuds on my window sill, my heart fills with gladness when I hear the trill of the birds in the treetops around any old hill. Tra-la-la, fiddle, dee-dee-dee. It gives me pain to dance and sing this, but I must do it again. Tra-la-la, fiddly-dee-dee-dee. There's penance to do. How happy I'll be when it's finally through. Now, you gotta give props. If that happened in a game that the GM came up with, that's pretty awesome. That's very good. I don't know if he made his son do this every morning after they camped in the game or what. That'd be very interesting to see. Now, he changes his appearance from time to time, though he always appears as an elf. In 1983's The Shady Dragon Inn describes his counterpart Parlay as left-handed, blonde, hazel-eyed, and large for an elf. It says furthermore that Parlay's shield is decorated with the hunting hawk symbol of his clan, and that his sword, No Cleaver, awesome, was forged long ago by dwarves. Now, we go through some of his notes from being in the Greyhawk universe and some of these other campaigns and novels. But here's a very, very neat little side thing here. There is some evidence that Melf and Warduke may know each other. In 1983's The Shady Dragon Inn, Warduke is mentioned as being a member of the same adventuring party as an elf named Parlay, both of whom had action figures for TSR's 1983 toy line. The fact that the Parlay figure was originally released under the name Melf and Warduke's resurgence in Greyhawk continually provide a topic of interest. And here we go. In 1983, a Melf action figure was released as part of LJN's Advanced Dungeons & Dragons toy line. However, the figure was eventually renamed as Parlay. Now, did Gygax blend these characters together? Did he take inspiration from the toys for the 1986 novel? We'll never know. But it's just a neat little crossover between the original homebrewed game that he was running to the toys. That's just a neat correlation between the two. I mean, Gygax was a genius, and without him, we wouldn't have ever had D&D. And granted, when it started out, it was a Tolkien-inspired fandom project, if you will, but it has grown to be so much more nowadays. And believe me, I wouldn't be the person I am today without playing D&D. So, I just think that's really cool. Anyway, hey, what's up everybody? Sorry to interrupt, but a couple things. First thing is, I kind of failed to mention in this that how courageous TSR and LJN were at the time. Back in 1983, I mean, it was a total witch hunt. It was the Satanic Panic era, and for them to, I hate to say it this way, but to be brave enough to just put that aside and to try to create something that was fun and great and memorable for a lot of us of our generation big props to them for that, that they weren't being swayed by the powers that be. And the fact that there was a D&D cartoon at the time, that's crazy too. I guess I didn't really mention it because I personally had made peace with it because I wrote like a two-part article over on my blog about it, and I kind of go into a lot more of the details and a lot of the crazy stuff that was happening at the time around D&D and just the culture of America in the 80s. So if you get a chance, check that out. Something else I wanted to add was some really cool info that I dug up. I just wanted to do a little bit more research on some of the characters, and I found some really neat info, mostly about Warduke, who, I mean, one of the most popular and awesome characters in the whole line. I mean, one of the biggest characters of the 80s in toys, in my opinion. But anyway, I wrote this down. His first appearance was in a module where he was a pre-made character called Quest for the Heartstone. That was also released in 83. And I mean, he's right there on the cover with Strongheart. That's awesome. I can't believe I've never seen this before. But anyway, the Shady Dragon Inn book that came out, very cool. It's on my radar now. It's one I didn't know existed, but it's a book chock full of NPCs. And that's all it is. It's a bunch of pre-made characters that Dungeon Master could just pick. I'm looking for a thief. Boom, right there's one. What's really interesting about it is, first off, they offer a little bit more backstory on Warduke. And originally, Warduke was a close friend of Strongheart, but he was corrupted by the Heartstone from that module, and it made him evil. So after that, they became enemies. Now, this is a neat factoid as well, that Warduke's origins may go all the way back to 1978. On the cover of Dragon magazine, which back then was called The Dragon, of Dragon magazine number 17, there's a character that resembles him a lot on the cover. Now, that's how you do a magazine cover. That is an awesome cover, and if I had a van, that would be painted on the side, on top of 100 other things that are awesome like that. But anyway, this could be his original origin of how the artist team at TSR, when they were putting together the characters for the toy line, may have found inspiration in this. Now, something else about the, let me get the name right again, as I throw down my little notes here. But the Shady Dragon Inn campaign book. Now they have a special characters section, and that's where a lot of the toy line characters appear and their stats and stuff. But what's really interesting is there's a lot more of them. There's thief characters, there's like dark clerics, more wizards and mages, and really neat characters. Now I'm curious, were those planned to be figures at one time? Were they shot down because clerics, even though there was a goodly cleric, but were dark clerics seen as evil, like straight up evil, dark gods and stuff, and thieves as being not a very good character for kids to want to play with, even though we had an assassin? But anyway, I found that really interesting. Could these characters have been toys as well? Anyway, back to your regular scheduled program. But if you like what you see, hit the thumbs up. If you want more of this, subscribe. And if you got something to say, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, keep being rad, stay dorky, peace out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. These are some great toys. I would love to track them down one day. If any of y'all have any, let me know, because it would be cool to hear your stories about them. And if you don't have them anymore, I want to hear those stories too, to what it was like playing with them growing up. But anyway, until next time, keep being rad, stay dorky. My name's Rob. See you next time.